Hi, it's Jerry Robertson. Welcome back to a new edition of Newsmakers Journal of the Vaccine Year. It is Wednesday, January 20th. And a few hours ago, Joseph Robinette Biden was sworn in as the 46th president of the United States. Donald Trump slunk off to Mar-a-Lago, where we believe he's now on the golf course. Huge changes going on. Big transition. And here to explain it all to us is my Calbuzz partner, the esteemed political analyst and polling expert, Phil Trounstine. How are you, brother?
I'm doing all right, partner. It's quite a day. It's we've been waiting to exhale, and now we can finally exhale.
It really is an interesting sort of physical experience. And I think I'm probably not alone in feeling this, that you don't have to be thinking about what the next thing Trump's going to do or what the next tweet's going to say or what the new outrage. He's just been completely filling our heads every day for the last 4 years.
And it's consumed so many people. Even if you tried to ignore it, even if you've tried to ignore Donald Trump, you can't do it because it just seeps into. For 4 years, it has seeped into practically every aspect of our lives and made people depressed and anxious and truly upset for 4 years.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the inauguration and Joe Biden's speech. He was very insistent that he wanted to speak outdoors despite the pandemic. There wasn't the huge crowd there usually is, of course. Everyone was wearing a mask, but you've covered a lot of these speeches. You've written speeches for a politician. What's the lead of this speech?
Well, immediately when he said democracy prevailed, it seems to me that was the line for history that that marks this inauguration. And um, Biden obviously, as he has during the campaign, he talked a tremendous amount about unity and the need for people to set down their arms and try to reach out their arms. In fact, that's exactly what the young poet, what was her name at the very end, said, um, reflecting reflecting what Biden had said. Um, and now you're going to have to pause. I have to pause for a minute to move the dog back out of the room because he came back in here and he's whining and he's going to bother us. So you talk to our viewers for a second. I'll be right there.
I'm going to just pause.
Pause it.
And now Bingo has gone from the room. Phil is back. And he was in the middle of a thought. No, I think you're right. The democracy prevailed, or let us end this uncivil war, I think was
This
another
uncivil war. I thought that was a good line.
line that might be memorable as well. But look, bottom line, and I've been looking at your social media posts today, and you're in with this wave of optimism, which I, of course, find extremely uncomfortable as a natural matter. But let's face it, this was not a peaceful transfer of power. This is the first
No.
time we have not had a peaceful. You had a mob try to stop the certification of the Electoral College.
I think, in fact, Jerry, I think it's a really important point to stop for just a second and reflect on. When people think that there was a riot or a big demonstration against Biden or something, and that people broke into uh, uh, the Capitol building and ransacked the Capitol building, it's much more than that. As you just said, it was an attempt to stop the certification of the election.
Hang on
It
one
was
second.
not. It wasn't just a mob action. It was intent behind it. The intent was to stop the transfer of power, and whatever that is, Jerry's got to do
Now I had to
No.
plug in I'm losing battery, but okay, we're all
Yeah.
set
It
now.
was an attempt to actually interfere with the transfer of power.
Yeah,
It
stop.
wasn't
Yeah, that was the point at which the mob went, and they were incited by the president, then president, and of course he's now been impeached for that, and the
right.
Senate's going to take that up. But here's the issue that I see coming out of all of this. Biden, he referred to it, but I don't think he really tackled it in the speech. But he said, recent weeks and months have taught us a painful lesson. There is truth and there are lies. Lies told for power, referencing Trump without mentioning him, and for profit, Fox News, Newsmax, and others. And each of us has a duty and responsibility as citizens, as Americans, and as leaders who have pledged to honor our Constitution and protect our nation, to defend the truth and to defeat the lies. But you have basically 3 out of 4 Republicans, 1 out of 3 Americans who believe that Joe Biden stole the election, that Donald Trump won, perhaps in a landslide, and that it's Biden who has carried out a coup d'etat. And they don't recognize him as legitimate. So it's fine to call for unity, which he did throughout the speech, and at times very gracefully. But how do you address that problem, that people are living in a parallel universe?
I completely agree. I mean, we've talked about you and I at Calbuzz have talked about the death of truth for almost a decade. We've talked about the post-truth politics in America, and this was the culmination of that. And now that we had a president who pounded the podium for 4 years telling lies, we now have this massive number of Americans. 70 million people thought he ought to get a second term. A third of the people adults in America think that Biden's not legitimate. Um, let's go back. What we both know that misogyny and racism and isolationism and nationalism have been rampant in the United States all along. It's not as if these things weren't here, but for 50 years or so, we tamped them down. We pushed them down. We we made them so outrageously unpopular that these were not expressed ideas. We pushed them into a box. Trump comes along and opens the box, and out come all the screaming monkeys and flying uh, insects and biting monsters, um, and they're loose in the atmosphere. How do we get them back in the box? A call for unity, as you say, is a little naive in the face of all that. I think what's going to happen is it's going to have to be suppressed again. That is suppressed by superior behavior, superior ideas, and because I don't think you can just wave a magic wand and these impulses that underlie American society just go away.
Well, Hannah Arendt talked about this in authoritarianism. The purpose of authoritarians lying is not to have people believe what they're saying, but rather to not know what to believe. And I think
Right.
to a large extent we're in that. And you see people in this QAnon conspiracy theory drawn into this cult-like behavior. But in a broader sense, here's my concern. This is like the stab in the back theory that which Hitler arose, that it was a secret cabal of socialists and Jews and bankers who surrendered Germany, or the lost cause of the Confederacy, that they were really the aggrieved party, the South, and had all these heroes. The big lie, basically. And Trump has sold this big lie to tens of millions of people.
That's correct.
And the elected representatives in Congress, 130 some Republicans in the House, 7 senators, prominently Josh Hawley of Missouri and Ted Cruz of Texas, voted against certifying the electoral vote, saying, giving weight to these totally baseless charges of massive voter fraud. And it seems to me until they have a reckoning with the truth, until you have those people say he was legitimately elected, there was no voter fraud, it's going to be very hard to move on.
Well, I don't even think that does the job, Jerry. I mean, I think Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz are the point of the spear, but they're whether or not, first of all, I don't think those two in particular are ever going to concede because I think they've staked out the Trump wing of the party as their future. Now, here's one way this could be abated in the future. Trump says there's some indication that he may try to form a new party, a
Patriot Party, the
Patriot Party. If that happens, and that portion of the population, which is so far clustered around Donald Trump and the Republican Party, pulls away from the Republican Party and divides, and we wind up with 2 parties besides the Democratic Party, that will be a very good thing for democracy in the long run, because we don't have coalition, we don't have a parliamentarian system, and so the Trump Party will be a minority party, but so will the Republican Party. I mean, I think that if that happens, that's the seeds of destruction of his own movement.
Well, yeah, and I looked at it another way. What you're saying is there's this split in the Republican Party between the Trump populists, white supremacists, neo-fascists, and a lot of Christian white evangelicals, some of whom believe he was sent from God to do all this,
Right.
And then you have the establishment Republicans led by Mitch McConnell, who are in the business of giving tax cuts to rich people and easing off on regulations for business. I mean, and having conservative judges. McConnell, interestingly enough, has now said in a speech yesterday that people rioted because they were lied to by the president. So he has, it seems to me, finally, after weeks and weeks of going along with Trump's craziness, has finally admitted the fact. So how important do you think the trial in the Senate is, one way or the other, whether he's convicted or not? Is it essential to moving on that he be convicted, or if he's not convicted, everybody will just say, oh, well, he's gone anyway?
Well, I don't think it's essential that he be convicted. I think it would be great if he were convicted. I think I don't know if it's possible without an impeachment conviction of banning Trump from running in the future. I think that's what McConnell would like to do. He would like to take Trump off the table personally as a future factor. But the split it's hard to imagine that the Republican Party has a future if the entire Trump base splits off. It seems to me that would be a good thing, and I think that could happen whether or not there's a conviction in the Senate.
All right, let's go back to today and happier things. Lady Gaga was pretty good.
I thought she was terrific. I thought J-Lo was terrific also. I thought, you had Woody Guthrie sort of reaching from beyond the grave with This Land Is Your Land, and combined with America the Beautiful, with thank God nobody's saying God Bless America. which is a much more, I mean, even though it's written by a Jew, Irving Berlin, it's a much more militant and ugly song compared to America the Beautiful. And I thought Lady Gaga was terrific. I thought Garth Brooks was great, and J Lo was terrific.
Yeah, and the poet Amanda
Yeah, what's
she got
her
a
last name?
solo show.
Gorman. Yeah, she's a
Amanda Gorman. Yeah.
22-year-old young woman from Los Angeles.
Well, and there's the future. I mean,
Yeah.
that was the interesting thing. I mean, you got this 78-year-old white guy being sworn in as president, and then the history,
Right.
California's Kamala Harris as vice president, and then to have this poet kind of tie it all up in a bow, you really saw, and the conflict here is between the old white, supremacist, male, heteronormative, patriarchal, whatever you want to say, America, and the emerging America, which is obviously very multicultural and very different.
But it's interesting that Biden is and he says it himself. He's a transitional figure. He's uh, he's part of the quote old guard, one of the good guys in the old guard. But he is part of the old guard, and there's a new day coming. And look at look at California's contribution, not only the poet, but to the coming administration. You've got California and Kamala Harris. We've got our own Javier Becerra, who's going to be administration, probably in charge of the entire COVID operation, and that's the future. We always feel like we are, and in many ways, California is the future.
Well, yeah, and Harris obviously now a very historically consequential figure.
Don't you think that in
I know.
fact the election of Kamala Harris, as much as Calbuzz has been critical of Kamala,
Well, that was really mostly you, Phil. I rarely had an unkind
just for the reader's sake, we'll love with them. But Jerry was the chief whipsaw against this poor woman. But anyway, no, as much as we've been critical of Kamala Harris, her election is even more historic than his. In that she's broken it's broken so many barriers all in one move for her to be in that position.
Well, and let's face it, I mean, we were critical of Harris repeatedly for very good reasons. I mean, I think she's not a politician who is driven by ideas or principles. She's driven by ambition and transactional, and she's very good at it. But now you're not supposed to say stuff like that. All of a sudden, it's verboten to be critical of Kamala Harris. I hope that doesn't last too long. Another Californian who's central to this whole drama, of course, is Kevin McCarthy from Bakersfield, the House Minority Leader, Republican leader, who went along with the 130. I mean, 2 hours after this mob came, trying to hang Mike Pence and Nancy Pelosi and get all these people, Kevin McCarthy joins 130 some other House Republicans in voting not to certify the votes. But now, this morning, he decided to go to church with Joe Biden. And then he's standing around the House like none of this ever happened. What's his future?
Well, I don't know, because he's still fine, I think, inside the Republican Party, and he's fine in his home district, which is what Bakersfield. I think that there's he is going to become increasingly important depending on how things play out in the House in the next election. And Mitch McConnell, I think, is also going to be terribly important. These are two of the most transactional characters that we've ever had in leadership positions, where, as far as they're concerned, nothing happened yesterday. It's all happening right now or tomorrow. And whatever we did before, it really doesn't matter.
Well, and Go
I
ahead.
think they
finish
may
it.
get away with it.
Yeah, I wonder if they will, because before the insurrection, what's Nancy's got, Pelosi's got what, +7, +8, something like the very slim
Yeah.
majority. And, the midterms are 2 years, and the president's party always loses seats. So it looked very much like McCarthy was poised to become speaker in 2 years, and the Republicans take back the House. Now you wonder, whether this is going to still have any impact in 2 years. It's a huge historical event. January 6th, people tried it was a coup d'etat, it was a failed coup. But are any of these Republicans going to pay a price for that, given the fact that most Republicans think it was stolen?
I don't know. I kind of doubt they will, as long as there's only one. Uh, I mean, there's one Republican Party, and there's no place in it for anybody who's anything like Steve Schmidt or Mike Murphy or any of the sort of rational Republicans, Jim Brulty types that we've known for so many years, who are thoughtful conservatives who happen to have a particular set of values, but they're decent human beings and they have a sense for
Well, yeah, I mean, because
decency
one of
about
the
life.
values, one of the key values that they always had and that they preached sometimes too much was about character. That character mattered, and that's why they hated Clinton so much.
Right,
Uh,
right,
because he's, messing around with interns in the White House and stuff.
right.
But when Trump comes along, character suddenly goes out the window. I mean, you can't think of a more corrupt personality than Donald Trump.
Right, but
It doesn't matter.
that's true. That's true. But you look at what happened is Trump drove those people out of the Republican Party, or they. And now the question is, I really think the biggest question nationally is what happens to the Republican Party? Does it split? If Trump does create this um,
Patriot.
patriot party, and the Republican Party becomes kind of a place of reasoned conservatism, there's probably a number of Democrats who would join that. People who are Democrats who would join that kind of a Republican Party. Um, it might be, but I think overall the Democratic Party would benefit from that, and you'd weaken the conservative movement. So
Um,
I'm all for Trump forming a new party, because I think it just elects Democrats.
yeah. Well, I hate to do this, but let's just talk about issues for a second,
Oh,
and policy and substance.
mm,
My
like we
favorite
know
thing.
something. I mean, pretend like we
You
know
look at
something about politics.
you look at this agenda of stuff that's facing Biden. Obviously, the most difficult set of circumstances a president's inherited probably since FDR, maybe since Lincoln ever. I mean, you got once a century pandemic, the economy, is stalled, tens of millions of people unemployed suddenly, the conflicts over race, which are very raw. And then you have that, oh, by the way, democracy's imperiled,
Right.
as a third of the people don't think the government's legitimate. What do you think the most important thing that Biden needs to get done
I
quickly?
think he needs, if Joe Biden can in 100 days get 100 million shots in people's arms,
Vaccine.
um,
You think
vaccine.
vaccine?
I think if he could get the vaccine in people's arms, if he can attack, the first thing he has to do is get control of the COVID pandemic. And uh, that's an enormous problem. It's not a partisan issue, except that every time Democrats try to do something about it, uh, there are Republicans who don't want to who want to stop them. Now that may change post Trump, and as elections for new senators and re-election for Congress people comes around, um, those people in Kentucky got to get shots too. Those people in Tennessee and Arkansas and Missouri, Josh Hawley's constituents need to get relief. And uh, even Ted Cruz's people need to get relief. So there's there's a chance here that because Trump's out of the way, and we're going to have a much more aggressive federal government presence in this issue, that something could be done. I mean, Ron Klain, the incoming chief of staff, handled the Ebola crisis for the Obama administration. Now he's chief of staff for Biden. That's a good thing. We have people with some experience, and if you look at the quality of people that are on the Biden COVID team, it's just enormous. They're people of science. They're people of medicine. They're not a bunch of hacks.
Yeah, Laura Capps has an op-ed on Newsmakers today about how important the staff and the quality people that Biden has picked are plenty of free people. Yeah, I think the theory of the case, Trump, for some reason, saw it as a binary choice between public health or business, that the economy or the pandemic. And I think Biden realizes you're not going to get the economy to recover until you get the pandemic under control. So he's got to get those. I agree with you. That's the first thing, 100 million shots. He's got to, manufacturing, distribution, all of these things. It's not rocket science, excuse the expression, but for some reason, Trump didn't want to do it. Then the stimulus, I think, is job two, to get that $1,400 and for people for relief. And I think that's where you're really going to see, are the Republicans going to be, how are they going to play that? Are they going to be obstructionist, or are they going to do what makes sense from a policy perspective?
I think we're going to see fairly quickly whether or not the absence of Donald Trump causes Republicans to look at these issues through the lens of relief for their constituents, as opposed to fear that they're going to get a primary against them. Because I think that's what's caused these Republicans in the Senate and the House to move so far to the right on all these fundamental issues. Is they're just afraid. They have been afraid that if they cross Donald Trump, they'd get a conservative or a Tea Party patriot type run against them in a primary. And so if that's gone from as a threat, and I don't know that it is, but if it's gone as a threat, then we have some hope that some of the things that Biden wants to do, some minimal things he wants to do, can maybe get done.
Yeah, well, you wonder. Trump, of course, always talks a good game. You wonder how active he's going to be in this. I mean, he's threatened a number. Liz Cheney, prominently the number 3 Republican in the House leadership from Wyoming, the daughter of Dick Cheney, who stood up and made a very courageous and correct attack on Trump in the impeachment thing, was one of 10 Republicans. Right. Now there's a movement to get rid of her by the so-called Freedom Caucus, Jim Jordan, and those people, which Trump is backing. He's vowed to take her out. John Thune, the senator from South Dakota, is another one of his targets. He's even down on McCarthy. He used to call Mike Heaven. Now I understand he's calling him the P word, the thing you grab them by, which I'm not allowed to say on collegiate radio. But and McConnell as well. So it'll be interesting to see how he plays it. But there was that great moment this morning. Trump left, the first president since Andrew Johnson, another great American, to not attend his successor's inauguration. He left early, having this half-baked rally, giving a speech, all of this weird stuff. But in the background, as he was getting on the plane, was Frank Sinatra singing "My Way," and then they cut to the pictures of Biden in church with McConnell and McCarthy. So it was kind of like, instant change of tone. But all right, well, listen, thanks for helping us sort it all out. A lot of big questions remain. To me, it's still, until we change somehow the profit motive for media organizations to fill their viewers with misinformation, fake news, disinformation. Hello, Fox News, Newsmax. Oh,
Well,
no.
but like I say, I think the thing that we have to watch is how busy is Trump going to be defending himself against state charges in New York and other places, compared to, can he actually maintain any sort of a presence that causes senators and congressmen to still be afraid of getting hit from the right. If Trump no longer has that ability, then I think that we have some hope that the House and the Senate can get something done.
Yeah. And we should also mention that of the 147 clemency orders he issued last night, Steve Bannon, the great Steve Bannon, was one who hadn't even been gone to trial yet. And if you don't think that's because Trump's trying to get his hand in the pocket of Bannon's Chinese benefactor, you're wrong. Because
we don't know we have no idea who's going to loan Trump money. Deutsche Bank is cut him loose.
I'm telling you, it's Bannon's guy. Bannon's rich billionaire friend whose yacht he was arrested on. Yeah. At least we don't have to deal with this day to day anymore. That's the great thing. We got a normal person in the White House. So let's hope things straighten out. All right, Phil Trounstine, thanks so much for joining us from Aptos, the political capital of California.
Absolutely.
And, it's Jerry Roberts. We'll see you next time on
all right.
On News.
Take care, partner.
Take care.